Rob Donovic is going to lead us in the pledge this evening.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Donovic. Good evening and welcome to the 1,896th meeting of the Livonia City Council. This is the voting meeting, and minutes of this meeting will be approved at the next regular meeting scheduled to be held on Monday, May 27th, 2020, and I will note that will also be held in a Zoom format like this meeting. Clerk, please take the roll.
Councilmember Donovic,
here.
Councilmember Jolly,
Present.
Councilmember Toy,
Here.
Vice President Barr,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember McCullough,
Here.
President McIntyre.
Here, we have all members of council present with us this evening. At this time, we'll have the presentation of the minutes. These are the minutes from the 1,895th regular city council that was held on April 27th, 2020. With a, I'm sorry. Council?
So moved.
Second.
Motion to approve by Kathy White and second from Councilmember Jolly. Would the clerk please take the vote?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the minutes from the April 27th council meeting are approved unanimously. At this time, I would like to ask the council if anyone has any announcements, tributes, or recognitions they'd like to make this evening.
Madam President.
Who's that? I'm sorry.
Toy.
Uh,
If I may, with everything that's happening in today's world and some very dear people we do a lot of business with in my business, because it's a funeral home, we had Deborah Morgan pass from the virus just this week and left 5 children and a husband. And I just want to recognize Deborah's existence here on earth and all the great things she did for so many. So we all have to be very careful. And I know our mayor and our administration and our council, we're all working together to make sure people stay safe, but it's still out there and people need to stay in place. And our condolences deeply to Deborah Morgan and her family. God bless her. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Toy. Anyone else?
Council President.
Yes, Councilmember.
Tomorrow, I'm not sure if attendees at home or any of the members of council of the city have saw this, but the Blue Angels will be conducting flyovers. As of yet, there's been no announcement of Livonia. However, Novi is a close nearby community. The Blue Angels will start in the morning around 11 a.m. That's been public so far. And the 127th Wing out of Selfridge Air Force Base will also be conducting flyovers. So if you happen to be looking outside, you might see some planes flying by, or let your family members know as well. And you can find that information online.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Donovic.
Madam President?
Yes, Councilmember Barr.
Raise my hand so you can see who's talking. As those of you that have served with me for a while know, May is a big month in my household. You all graciously wished me a happy birthday last time. My birthday was last Wednesday, but my daughter's birthday was the following day. And so we now have 3 teenagers in the house. And then my wife's birthday is actually this Wednesday. So I just want to wish both Jamie and Kelsey a very happy birthday.
Madam President,
Kelsey and Jamie, who,
Madam President,
yes, Councilman.
once again, I'm sorry. I just want to say that our mayor, Marie Miller-Brosnan's birthday was last week. As happy belated birthday, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you.
29 or 39 again. I can't remember which.
Something, yeah, something in that range.
Yes, right in that range. So we want to wish her a very happy belated birthday. Happy birthday, Mayor.
Speaking of 39th birthdays, we recognized at our last meeting our Council Vice President Scott Barr's birthday, which was last week on May 6th. What we failed to note is it's a landmark or a milestone birthday for the Council Vice President. He is 39 plus 1. So welcome to the new decade, Scott, to your new decade. Really started, but welcome to the 40s. Some of us wish we were still there. And
President McIntyre,
yes,
I'll just say you were the one that actually pointed out, but I think it's worth noting, we now have, by age, we have 5 decades represented on this council. The 20s,
Yes,
30s,
we
40s,
do.
and 50s, and then some others too. But
yes, we will. So anyway, we're glad you had a good birthday with your family. Council member.
if it wasn't for Brandon McCullough, we'd only have 4. But
I know. He's keeping us there. Councilmember Jolly, do we have any retirements?
Yes, we do, Madam President. We'd like to wish our former president of the Police Officers Union, Mr. Morgan. I think Mr. Donovan actually wished him a happy retirement last meeting, I believe, maybe 2 meetings ago. But Scott Morgan spent a career serving the Livonia Police Department and also served as the motor carrier officer for quite some time. And that's when I got to know him in the magistrate's courtroom, where he was always very quick to let me know what I did not know about motor carrier law. So he will be missed, but he was a good steward of the police department officers union, that is. And he will be missed, but I know he's still in the Livonia community, and we wish him well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Livonia is one of the few communities that has our own motor carrier enforcement officer, as most of you know. And the thing about Officer Morgan and his training and his experience, he had gotten to the point that he could tell by looking, and it didn't, if it was a 16-wheeler or an 18-wheeler, he could tell by looking, observing the tires, and come pretty close to knowing how far over it was. And he proved that to me one day when he told me what he thought it was, and then we went to the scales, and he was amazingly close. So we wish him the best. Does anyone else have any other announcements to make? All right. Seeing none at this time, I would like to introduce our department heads, and it's a little bit tricky because I can't see everyone. I have to do it off a list, so bear with me, and we won't probably go in the normal order because I usually do it based on who's sitting where, and no one's sitting anywhere tonight except at home. So starting with Mark Taramina, our city planner and economic development director, who's also been wearing other hats with the Together Livonia Cares program with our long-term care facilities, and also helping a lot and helped to get the donation center organized at the center. Paul Bernier, outstanding city attorney. We have our clerk, Susan Nash, with us. We have Mr. Todd Zielinczyk, our city engineer, with us. And let's see, we have the mayor with us this evening via Zoom. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
And I don't, if anyone sees anyone else that I'm missing, please let me know. But I think I got everyone that's all the departments line. And Casey O'Neill is also behind the scenes, our director of information systems, who has been making everything work in the most amazing way for the last 8 weeks. I do not have any, I take that back. I have 4 public hearings that I would like to announce. These will take place on June 1st, 2020, and we would anticipate that these 2 will be held via Zoom. The first is an industrial facility exemption certificate. This is coming to us from Oakland Industries. Number 2 is a commercial rehabilitation exemption certificate. This is coming to us from the Livonia Hotel Group. Number 3 is a proposed street lighting, and this is the assessment roll from Capri Court Site Condominiums. And the 4th public hearing will be a proposed street lighting assessment roll for the Dover Site Condominiums. And at this time, we go to our audience. If anyone from our audience would like to communicate with the council regarding any item that is not on this evening's agenda, now is your opportunity to do so. I do see that we have, excuse me, we have some of the department heads on the other list, and Brandy Isaacson, our Director of Housing, Judy Preby, our Legislative Director, who's recovering from her knee surgery and will be back at work very soon, has been working remotely, but will be back full-time soon. And also Mike Slater, our Director of Finance. And I also see a special hello to our former mayor, Jack Engelbretson, who's joined us as a member of the audience this evening. So seeing none, we will go ahead with reports from the mayor and other city officials. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, and thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Council, once again, for providing me the time this evening to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that are going on throughout the city. You've all done a remarkable job of keeping up on things, so this really provides me with a chance to let folks at home know what's going on, because you're well versed on all of this. First of all, just want to say thank you to the community and to each of you for reinforcing Livonia and Michigan's stay at home, stay safe executive order. It's really important. You know, we are just at the very beginning of seeing some of our numbers begin to plateau and hopefully to decrease. But we're only going to be able to continue to see that if we remain vigilant. So I appreciate all of your support in encouraging residents to do that. One of the other things that we're hearing a lot of chatter about this week and that we're heavily engaged in is what's going on at the federal level. There's a large relief package that is being discussed by Congress, by the Senate in particular. And Livonia has really been active in trying to get people to pay attention to the fact that during this pandemic, we really found ourselves and continue to find ourselves at the eye of the storm. And sometimes you don't even know that you're there. Until something happens that stirs you and makes you think, let me take a look at that. So the thing that made us say, let me take a look at that was a couple weeks ago, we got our first chunk of relief dollars from the federal government. And we received a check from the CARES Act for a little over $196,000. And we thought, oh, okay, fine. That's probably a first installment and there's probably more on the way. And lo and behold, we found that that was not a first installment. It was the only installment, and that other communities surrounding us had received considerably more money. And we found that there was really a lack of correlation between how much relief money we were receiving and how much of the disaster we were actually experiencing. When we look at what's happening in Livonia, what we find is that we rank second in the state in number of cases that we have. We also are ranking very high in our morbidity rate. So a lot of people, we find that we have, out of 100 people, 16% of them will die in Livonia if they contract COVID-19, compared to 12% in New York City, for example, which has also been hit remarkably hard by this. So we looked at all of this and we said, here we are. We're standing up an operation, the Together Livonia Cares program, which we're putting considerable investment and time into, making sure that our 15 long-term care facilities have the services that they need, that they have the supplies that they need, that they have the training that they need. And all of this is costing us money. And when all is said and done, we're not quite certain that we're going to be treated fairly in this mix. So it caused us to put together some analysis around that. We put together an infographic, which all of you have received, and it really does a nice job, I think, of clearly outlining where Livonia fits in this big picture. It lets people know, especially our legislators know, that there is something unique that is happening here in Livonia. And the unique thing that's happening really comes down to something that we've all talked about before, and that is where we stand in terms of the number of long-term care facilities that we have in our city. We have 22% of all of Wayne County's long-term care facilities here in Livonia. And as a result of that, we have an aging population. existing in close confined spaces. And this is making it very difficult for these organizations to make sure that people are isolated. And as a result, we're seeing a high morbidity rate there. So we jumped in trying to protect what we believe are probably about 2,100 vulnerable lives in Livonia, in not only nursing care centers, but in senior housing units as well, Alzheimer care facilities, things like that. So we put together that Together Livonia Cares program, which I appreciate Council President McIntyre, you mentioning Mark Termina's role with that. Mark has been really instrumental in making sure that we've done a great job securing donations. And all of you have really contributed to that effort as well. You'd all received masks that were donated last week, and most of you have donated them to either Together Livonia Cares or directly to the hospital where they're going to be needed. And that has been fantastic. But so while other communities throughout the country and throughout the state are benefiting because they've had a considerable amount more money contributed to their efforts, we've had to rely on donations to help us to move this program along. So we made this effort, and we're going to be constantly talking this week with our federal legislators, our senators, as well as our congresswoman, about what it is that Livonia believes ought to be a better model. Right now, the model for the distribution of the funds is based on the Community Development Block Grant Fund, which you all are familiar with. And a big component of how block grant money is distributed is based on a lower scale on population, but a higher threshold for how it's distributed is based on the age of your community, the age of the property in your community. So we don't happen to have a lot of aged property in our community. So as a result, we don't receive as much money. Now, I don't know that COVID necessarily looks at property and says, we're going to strike where there's a more aged selection of property. It just says wherever there are going to be elderly people, COVID is going to strike. So because Livonia finds itself with a larger aging population than most communities, we also find ourselves harder hit by this. So I think it's important, I want to make sure that you all are up to speed on this so that when the final numbers come down and, you know, the final amounts are distributed, just know that we are going to be continuing to fight and continue to have to fight for our fair share of relief funding. The formula will not automatically lend itself to fairness in this case, unless the federal government sees the rationale and sees the reasoning in what we're trying to propose and does put another formula in place that tries to recognize where the most devastating effects of the COVID virus have been. And I do believe that there are probably other communities like this throughout the country that find themselves outside of a large metropolitan area, positioned in a city like Livonia where it's easy to access and where it's a place where it's really great to do business like Livonia is. So long-term care facilities will naturally locate there. And I would imagine there are cities like us throughout the country. And we're happening to be hit a lot more. So hopefully we'll be able to make a dent in people's understanding of why perhaps another formula needs to be put in place in addition to COVID. And let me just say this. I don't think anybody's at fault for this, by the way. I think that this is just a matter of trying to work as quickly as we can in an environment where we've never had to work before. So legislators are anxious to get relief to communities. Community Development Block Grant money has provided the nation with a model that has been used for years for the distribution of funds. And, you know, for the most part, various communities at various times have found it to be slightly inequitable, but for the most part, it has been a fair distribution of money. So that was the recipe that got pulled off the shelf this time. It just doesn't happen to be a recipe that works for Livonia, which has been one of the hardest hit cities in the nation with this virus. So we're going to be pressing forward, trying to get people to understand that. And as we continue to make that press forward, we also know that there is a distribution of funds that is going to happen at the state level as well. And we're going to plead our case there. There is a distribution of funds that happens at the county level, and we're going to plead our case there. So just at every turn, we'll be talking about this. And if I can answer any of your questions relative to that, I'm happy to. My goal is to make sure that you're all on board and that you can serve right alongside the administration as an advocate for a more level playing field when it comes to the distribution of relief funding. So in the meantime, the other thing that I wanted to just talk a little bit about was what we do expect the impact to be for us here in Livonia. And while we don't have all the final numbers in place, we do think it's important that we begin to brace for an economic downturn. Something that we do know that is happening is that our fair share of state revenue, state shared revenue funding is going to be down by 50%. We already saw that happen in March and April. And so that's going to lead to a $1.4 million decrease in our general fund budget. We've also seen where we've lost fees for our rec center and are kind of amounting now to the point of $1.5 to $2 million worth of lost revenue in that one particular area. We know that we have a large business sector that uses water, hotels, for example, and we're going to see a 15 to 20% reduction in revenue from water sales as a result of them having to be shut down. People are driving less, so the estimate now is that our gas tax revenue in Livonia will be reduced probably by about $1.1 million. That's our Act 51 money. And then we, of course, are expecting that if this continues for an extended period of time, that property values are going to suffer as a result of it, that people are no longer going to be able to afford their homes, and we'll see property values decrease and foreclosures go up once again. So as we're looking at all of those, 1.4 million, 2 million, another 1.1 million, you look at what we've been handed in a check from the federal government so far to try to help us to mitigate some of that damage, and you can see where it doesn't even come close. And yet a city like Dearborn, similar size to Livonia, they received a check for $1.1 million. So it gets hard to justify the fact that not only are we losing money, most likely at the same rate that Dearborn is losing money, but we're having to spend more money in order to fight the virus, in order to take care of the people that live here in our community. So with all of that information looming, we of course have not sat back, and we really tried hard to take the actions that we believe are prudent and necessary. The first one was in our with our workforce, where we furloughed 37% of our workforce. All of those people remain on furlough. I believe this is week 3 of the furlough. And in cutting 37% of our workforce, we made some of the deepest cuts that have been seen in the state of Michigan. We did it with the intention that we wouldn't have to go back and make a second round of cuts. And thank goodness, we did it as prudently as we did, because it is saving us about $160,000 a week. The second component is a freeze or a reduction on some programs. Some programs are going to be diverted, scaled back in our capital program this year. So unless something has already been launched, unless it's already off the ground, unless it's detrimental and vital to the maintenance of our property and our investment in the city, a lot of projects are going to be getting a second look. And by Wednesday, we ought to have that list of projects to present to you. And that'll tell us what it is that we're going to have to just take off the books for this year. A lot of things will come off the books simply because there isn't a workforce available to complete the projects. Some will come off because they're not as necessary in a crisis like this. Others may be reduced. Some may be scaled back. Some may just be postponed for a year or two. So we believe that that'll result in some additional cost savings as well. So it's important to know that while we are bracing ourselves for a really harsh economic downturn, that we are also doing our very best to mitigate that damage. So we're going to stay vigilant and try to keep you best informed as we possibly can relative to that plan. The second thing that I want to share with you is just that the city is fully engaged right now in our reopening plans. We're watching closely what happens in Lansing and keeping very careful track of the various phases that the governor mentioned in her last set of remarks last week. We're watching to see what areas of our economic sectors get opened up next. All of those then determine which city services we need to bring back quickest and which people come off furlough, which departments get stood back up. Do certain departments get stood up fully, or do we only put parts of departments in place? So we'll be looking, first of all, at what lines of service and levels of service need to come back. But most importantly, at the top of all of our decision-making is when we do bring people back, are we able to bring them back to the safest work environment possible? Our primary responsibility is to the 635 employees that we have. We can't afford to have an outbreak right here in City Hall. So we're working diligently right now to secure all of the supplies that are necessary, stockpiling on the masks and the hand sanitizer and the Kleenex and the disinfectant wipes and the acrylic and the glass. And we're trying to totally re-envision how it is that we do business here in City Hall. The City Hall leadership team has been exceptional in their meetings on this subject in doing something that I felt was necessary for a long time, and we're getting a chance to exercise that now, which is breaking down the silos of government. All too often, I believe that we operate in our lane, and we do a really good job of knowing exactly what we do in our lane. And sometimes, if you look next door, somebody else is doing something very, very similar. So just one small example is in the collection of funds. You know, we find that the water department collects funds and the assessor's office collects funds and the treasurer collects funds. So maybe there's a way that we can just have one area in the city where money is collected at. And that would cut down on, the number of people that are actually handling and managing things and can create, in some ways, a safer environment. So we're getting into all of those kinds of details. And I say that by way of just trying to brace you, to brace the community for the fact that once we do go back to operating, that it won't look like what it looked like before. It won't be a hustling and bustling city hall. It will most likely be a city hall where you come by appointment. We've worked for a number of months now operating remotely. A lot of people will continue to operate remotely. We are going to continue to encourage people to do business online with the city. And if we can create any more online avenues for business, we're going to work hard to create those online avenues for business as well. Because we believe in doing that we're not only keeping our 635 employees safe, but we're keeping our community safer too. So it's going to look different, but it will be functional. I think that we've remained functional during this crisis. So I have no doubt that in ramping up, we will continue with functionality right at the top of our list of things that we wish to achieve. And then the final thing I wanted to update you on was the Together Livonia Cares program and where we're headed with that. As we've gotten into this program, one of the things that we've learned is that there are other sectors within the community that are suffering from a lack of information, a lack of PPE, a lack of understanding of how to screen properly. And that's our adult foster care homes. So we've made some inroads there and compiled a list of, I believe it's 38 foster care facilities that we're going to try to speak to as well and try to share our knowledge, share what we've learned, share information about how to secure PPE and when necessary, work to secure the donations so that they can get what they need to take care of people in our community. Again, that's something that we're not finding that too many other communities are paying attention to. But again, given the way this disease travels, we think that's an important component of our ability to keep our city safe and to bring us back to health faster. And then the second element of the Together Livonia Cares program that we're working on right now is we are trying to get testing available to all of our nursing home residents as well as employees. And we had an indication from the state several weeks ago that they were prepared to step in and do that testing. We have not seen that realized. We had some indication from the county that they were prepared to come in and help administer all of that testing. And again, we have not seen that realized. So with that void, we're going to figure out how to do it. It needs to be done, and we're working with the fire chief right now to figure out how Livonia is going to do it. So I will be back with you on a more specific plan relative to that, probably by the end of the week. You'll have an update on that. So those are the 4 or 5 hot topics that we're busy working with here in the mayor's office and throughout the city. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them at this point.
Madam President.
Yes.
Yes,
Madam President.
yes. For the
Okay, thanks. Through the chair to the mayor. Mayor Brosnan, first of all, thanks again for being with us each time over the last few weeks. And my thanks to you and all the department heads for all your hard work on this. I've had the opportunity, particularly early on, to see some of that up close. Since then, Council President McIntyre, I know, has been deeply involved and has been communicating with us. But kudos to all of you. Thanks for taking the time to clearly explain it all. And I also want to thank you for being proactive on the financial front. I think that's laudable because we do have decreased revenue coming in, and better to react to that now than wait to react to that later. And so I'm pleased with a lot of those. Not pleased that we have to take those actions, but pleased that you're taking those actions. I do have a question, follow up on the TLC program. What type of money, you referred to money going towards that. What type of money are we talking about with that? What have we spent on that? What do we anticipate spending on that?
So we don't have a total yet of what we've spent on it, but we've had to put extra manpower toward it, and that's probably our single largest expense. Is that we're dedicating a considerable amount of time from our firefighter training officer, as well as the fire chief, and then the battalion chief as well, are 3 of the people that are critical to the training that's necessary that normally we would not be doing. As a result, we have a 6th unit that we've had to stand up in the fire department. So I don't know what the final costs are, or what the running total on that is. We're going to be working on securing that, because any day now we're going to be applying for, FEMA money to help us to offset some of those costs. We're quite certain, though, that based on many of the FEMA conversations that we've participated in, that those are very direct costs to fighting the COVID virus, and those should be reimbursed at least 75%. That's the indication at this stage of the game. Materials is probably the second biggest area of cost. And thank goodness we've had donations that have pretty much covered that.
Okay, so when we talk about this money that came from the CARES Act, and I know it's $196,000 now, I don't know. First, and I agree with you that the formula that was used for that was misguided, but do you anticipate a significant percentage of that going to the TLC program, or do you anticipate that going to cover some of the other costs you talked about, the lost rec fees, the lost water rates, the lost tax revenue?
No, actually, Council Vice President Barr, we expect that most of that money will go directly to the costs incurred for additional manpower and time. We're reaching a point now where I don't know that we're going to be able to continue to rely on the goodness of our neighbors here. There's going to be costs to purchasing supplies. So we're expecting that a lot of that money will be directed directly to the relief effort, not to offsetting the costs for rec center fees and things like that. As a matter of fact, the language around that funding doesn't allow for that. It has to all be direct, as a direct response.
Okay, so that you answered the next question I was going to ask. So thank you for that. One other thing, that's the extent of my questions. Thank you. One other thing I just want to clarify, and I'm not trying to be nitpicky here, but I think you said that I think you'll appreciate having clarified. the death rate within Livonia for the amount of cases we've had is roughly, I think you said 16.5%. That does not mean that 16% of people that get COVID in Livonia will die. It means 16% have died. And as you said, that's related to the high number of long-term care facilities that we have here. So I know what you intended with that, but I was jarring when I heard that the first time, and I just wanted to clarify that language for anyone that might be watching. Is we're talking about what the death rate has been. There's not something in the water that's killing off people in Livonia more than anywhere else. So thanks again for being with us here tonight, Mayor Brosnan.
Absolutely.
All right.
The chair to the mayor. I just got a question.
Yes, Councilmember McCullough.
Is there anything that we can do to assist with trying to get more federal dollars? When you posted that graphic showing that, some of the analytics behind what we're not receiving compared to other communities, I made a post. I think I forwarded it on, and I even said, I'm not here to cry over spilled milk. I'm just looking for a solution. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, while we're right here, if there's anything that us council members could do to assist you, or any direction that we can, because that coefficient and analytics behind it is not right.
Absolutely. And it's a great question, Councilmember McCullough. So we are encouraging people to contact their legislators in Washington, D.C. right now, because this is this week's conversation. It's happening. And right now, what they have is they have a bill on the floor that is continuing to use the Cdbg formula without any kind of overlay to it. We understand that we are probably, fighting a losing battle in trying to change the use of the Cdbg formula for this. It works for most cities. It just doesn't work for us. So for those cities that happen to be, an asterisk in the mix, we're saying that there ought to be another way to compensate us for the hardship that we've actually faced and dealt with. So if you have a moment and wish to contact your legislators, you'll find on the COVID relief page the contact information for each one of them and how you can access them. So we're encouraging residents to help us to carry that message and to make the calls, send the emails, and just to help us to get that point across. And they're willing to listen. That's the other thing, is that, we have been in touch with each one of their offices, and they're surprised to hear this. They've not heard this anomaly before. So people are trying to find a way to work with us to create some form of equity here. So I do think it's important that if yourselves or residents wish to weigh in on the importance of that, I think that goes a long way to sometimes moving legislation in the right direction.
Thank you.
Council President.
Yes, Councilmember Donovan.
Mayor Brosnan, I have a question. I know the governor has talked about a multi-phased approach to opening. Do you know, and I assume you might not at this point, do you anticipate during that phased opening from the state government when Livonia will start to reopen our services like the recreational center, or the library, or city hall? Just a question.
So the big when is the hardest question that anybody has to answer, because you've probably heard me say this. We're not in control of the timeline. The virus is in control of the timeline. And so we're going to very much follow the state directives. And as they begin to phase things back in, our plans are phased as well, so that we'll be ready to roll in phases. And I think the important thing to note there is that we may see portions of departments have to come back, not whole departments necessarily. And as you might expect, the departments and services, rather, that are going to come back probably last are those where we see the highest concentration of senior citizens. So our senior center will probably be one of the last things that we see up and operating. Library services will be further down the line. But I will say this, people are getting amazingly creative, our department heads, in how can we still provide some level of service where people are social distancing, and as soon as we get the go-ahead, can we do this in a safe manner? Because we also understand that people have a certain level of trust in our community, that if we invite them to an event, that they're going to be taken care of, that they're not going to walk into a volatile environment. So it's our job to create that safe environment.
Thank you.
That is the best I can give you. We do not have a timeline. I wish we did.
Anyone else? I don't see anyone else. Casey, I don't think I'm missing anyone. Am I missing anybody on council? All right, well, thank you very much, Mayor, for the outstanding update on all the really incredible work that's being done by your team and our amazing department heads and everyone that works for them. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Council President. It was good to be with you tonight. I'm gonna leave you all now. Take
Great,
care.
thank you. Have a good evening. All right. Hello, we will now continue with, we'll move forward with our report unless any of our other city officials who are with us this evening have anything to share with us. Clerk Nash, do you have anything that you wanted, any updates you wanted to provide on voting or upcoming election? You and I didn't talk, so I'm not sure if you do.
Well, the first round of absentee ballot applications are scheduled to go out there. Right now, we are going through the printer and we're rough drafting that, going through rough drafts. By the end of the month, the first round, anyone on the permanent application list should be receiving. And thank you for bringing this up, Madam President, because anybody that wishes to be on the permanent list, all they have to do is contact the clerk's office and we can put you on. Remember, the state of Michigan passed no reason absentee, so anybody is eligible to get an absentee ballot for any election, for this election or any election going forward. Just contact the clerk's office and we can help you with that.
All right, thank you very much. And I don't see that we have any updates from any of our other city officials, so we will move ahead with our consent agenda. This evening, for this evening's meeting, items 1 through 9 are listed on the consent agenda and they're voted on as one single item. It does not mean that they are any less important than any of the other items, but when they were reviewed and studied in our study meeting that took place on April 27th, they were determined not to be controversial in nature, and that's why they were put on the consent agenda to be voted on as one item.
Madam President?
Yeah, is that Councilmember Jolly?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to offer an approving resolution for the consent agenda.
Support.
Support. And any discussion? Anyone from the audience have any comments or, okay, seeing none?
Mr. President, who's the support? I missed it.
I'm sorry, who was support?
Councilmember McCullough.
McCullough.
Thank you.
All right, seeing none, if the clerk would please go ahead and take the vote on the consent agenda.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the consent agenda is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Continue ahead with the agenda, going to unfinished business, beginning with item number 10. And this is a roll call item, a roll call vote, and this is a proposed voting ordinance number 543 is amended. This comes to us from the Department of Law regarding petition 2019-12-01-07 submitted by Unleashed Pet Care Real Estate LLC for a change of zoning of property located at 9300 Middle Belt Road on the east side of Middle Belt Road between Joy Road and West Chicago in the southwest quarter of Section 36. That would be a rezoning from OS Office Services to C2 General Business. The first reading was given by Councilmember Kathy White on March 11th, 2020.
Madam President,
Yes.
this change of zoning will allow for the operation of a veterinary clinic at this location, and I'd be happy to offer second reading at this time.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember White. At this time, would we like to, is there any comment from council, or anyone from the audience who'd like to comment on this? I don't see anyone, so if we have no one, if we could go ahead, Madam Clerk, and please take the vote.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the amendment to the zoning ordinance is passed unanimously, and this ordinance change will become effective upon publication in the newspaper. We move on to item number 11. This is a waiver petition. This comes to us from the Planning Commission. It's petition 2020-02-0, I'm sorry, 2020-03-02-02, submitted by Unleashed Pet Care Real Estate LLC to operate a veterinary clinic on the east side of Middle Belt Road between Joy Road and West Chicago Avenue, 9300 Middle Belt Road in the southwest quarter of Section 36. So this is the operation of the vet clinic in the on the property for which we just approved the rezoning from OS to C2. Council.
So moved.
Was that,
Support.
I believe that was Toy and Barr. Council, any discussion? Would anyone from the audience to comment on this item? All right, I see one. So Madam Clerk, if you would please go ahead and take the vote.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the waiver petition is approved. Going on, item number 12, this too is a site plan petition that comes to us from the Planning Commission. This is regarding petition 2020-03-08-02, submitted by Lincoln Dental to construct an addition to the existing building located on the north side of Joy Road, Inkster Road and Harrison Avenue, 28,000 and 28,024 Joy Road in the southeast quarter of Section 36.
Council President,
Yes, Councilmember Donovic.
I just had a question for the petitioner, if or Mark Termino, whatever's correct here. In regards to the wall that is separating the residences and the actual property line, clarification if that wall is going to be of similar material, similar brick. That was my question for that.
Well, we can make it that way as part of the resolution, include that language to make sure that the new wall matches the existing wall as much as possible. I don't know if the petitioner or his architect is available to maybe
Do we have?
clarify that.
I don't think we have a
A motion?
We
motion.
don't have a motion. So moved.
Support.
Was that Toy and Barr?
It was Toy. Yep.
Okay. All right, going back to, sorry, Rob, I should have called that before you asked the question.
Madam President,
Yes,
I just wanted to point out, it might make it easier that item.
oh, I'm sorry, that's not Councilmember McCullough, that's Attorney.
If you look at number 13, it talks about it being of the same material.
Right.
Trash dumpster shares shall be maintained when it's not used, and they also talk about similar material, and it matches or complements exterior of the building. So that is part of it in condition number 13.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Anyone from the audience who's joined us this evening? I don't see anyone. So if, Madam Clerk, if you would please go ahead and take the vote on the site plan petition submitted by Lincoln Dental.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, and the council has unanimously approved and concurs with the recommendation of the planning commission. Approve the site plan, and we, subject to the conditions that were provided to us. Item number 13 is a request for the ability of the city to opt out of unsubscribed newspaper delivery, and it was to be referred to the law department. And this was offered by Councilman Donovan.
Madam President,
Yes.
I would like to make my motion to further to the next meeting for report and recommendation, or I don't know if that's the correct language.
I guess I need some, are we,
Madam President,
yes, Jim?
do we need an approving resolution here at this point?
I don't believe we do. I
I
think,
believe per our, Mr. Bernier, I think that might be the way to proceed here at this moment, is an approving resolution.
We need a resolution to send it to the law department, but I can tell council members that we've already prepared an ordinance that we're going to submit for the next regular meeting for your consideration. Possibly a first reading right at that point. Mr. Donovic suggested this last time. We looked at it, we studied it, and quite frankly, we were anticipating that we would get the resolution from Mr. Donovic referring to the law department. So we've already prepared a possible ordinance that we think that hopefully you'll be happy with, and we could have a first reading with it at the next regular meeting, if that answers the question.
okay,
But to officially get it to us, there should be a resolution.
yeah, I'm sorry, I confused myself as to where we were in this process. So we do need a motion. We need a motion to formally refer it to the law department.
So that motion I made, was that a correct motion, or should I?
Just offer
I'd like to offer an approving resolution.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
from Councilmember Jolly. Any discussion? Anyone from the audience? Seeing none, if the clerk would please take the vote.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye. And the motion is approved, and so this is formally referred to the department for their report and recommendation of the city's ability to opt out of unsubscribed newspaper deliveries. We will now continue with forward by moving to new business. This is item number 14. This is a proposed ordinance to provide for the acquisition and construction of additions, extensions, and improvements to the water supply and wastewater system of the city of Livonia. And number 2, to provide for the issuance and sale of $9,170,000 of revenue bonds, Series 2020, to pay the cost thereof. And this comes to us from the Department of Finance for the Drinking Water Revolving Fund, which is known as the DWRF. And this was originally Council Resolution 389-19. Good evening, Mr. Slater. We need a motion.
Madam President, I'll offer an approving resolution for purpose of discussion.
Thank you.
Support.
Jelly and White. And with that, council, I'll go to Mr. Slater unless anyone has any questions before we go to Mr. Slater. All right, Mr. Slater.
Good evening, Council. As part of your consent agenda this evening, you voted to approve the construction contracts related to this project. As indicated, it's a little over $9 million, and the money's to be borrowed through the State Drinking Water Revolving Fund. What you have before you this evening is the ordinance prepared by our bond council that needs to be adopted in order for us to borrow those funds. The anticipated closing on this is June 12, 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council? I don't see any questions from the council. Let me go to the audience. If anyone in the audience has any questions. And I don't see that anyone in the audience does. So if, Madam Clerk, if you would please go ahead and take the vote.
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Aye.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye, so the resolution is approved to the sale, for the issuance and the sale of the bonds to pay the cost of the drinking water revolving, I'm sorry, to pay the cost required for our drinking and our wastewater treatment facilities and processes in order to be consistent with the requirements of the drinking water program. All right, item number 15. This is a request for approval to amend the Community Development Block Grant Program, known as Cdbg, which the mayor referenced in her comments. This is for fiscal year 2019, the annual action plan. This comes to us from the Livonia Housing Commission, and this is in order to allocate funds received for the Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus, which is Cdbg-CV, for activities that address the COVID-19 related community needs in, of course, the city of Livonia. Council,
Madam President, I'll offer the resolution.
Support.
Jolly and McCullough. If the council have any comments or questions,
Madam Chair.
we'll go to, I'm sorry.
I'm here.
I was going to suggest that we'll go to Brandy Isaacson, the director of our housing department, and Ms. Isaacson will explain this to us. Good evening, Brandy.
Thank you, Council President. And good evening, members of council. I am here seeking a substantial amendment to our 2016 through 2020 consolidated plan. This plan was developed back in 2016, and it laid out plans for how we were going to be utilizing our community development block grant funding over the course of 5 years. Back then, we didn't anticipate any type of need for response to infectious diseases. So we are going back and adding this into our plan. Two elements of that plan that are going to change are we do have a public service allocation. We are going to be adding personal protection equipment, the purchase of, as well as COVID testing. So we are hoping to be able to provide at least 1,000 tests. The goal is to actually test our residents of our senior housing communities. These would be primarily the communities that are independent living, not part of the nursing care facilities, as well as any staff with the city that performs any services towards senior citizens. So this would be any of the staff that are working in the properties, as well as anybody over at City Hall that is working with any type of senior community programs, the senior center. And this is just, we want to kind of get a benchmark of who might test positive, who has the antibodies, so we can go forward on preventing the spread of COVID. Also, we do want to purchase some PPE. We haven't allocated a whole lot. There's about $20,000 that we have set aside for it. But our goal is to make PPE, primarily masks, available to residents who do not have access to the masks, and also businesses. Yes. So we recognize that this is limited, but hopefully with another round of CARES Act funding, we'll be able to include the purchase of more PPE. The new portion to our consolidated plan is economic development. We are proposing to provide small business grants. These grants will be in amounts of $2,500, $75,000, $7,500, and $10,000. And it's going to be determined on a rating system. These will be for businesses that employ 50 personnel or less, and they also have to have a percentage of their staff be on the moderate to low income bracket. So approximately their annual income cannot exceed about $42,000 a year. and the business does have to continue to employ them. So we're still working on the guidelines to this grant, but we wanted to be able to get it into the consolidated plan so we can move forward with allocating the funding. That program, we've allocated about 127,000, and our goal is to do between 15 and 20 small business grants.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes, Councilmember Toy.
Thank you. And I want to thank Brandy.
Would you like to offer,
I would like to offer an approving that way but I'd like to ask some questions if I may.
Absolutely.
but,
I need support, right?
I
right.
believe we had a motion, didn't we?
Oh, I'm sorry, we did. I'm so sorry. That's my fault.
That's okay. That's right. At least
Otherwise, we wouldn't have had Brandy explaining it. Okay. I'm sorry, Councilmember Toy.
No, you're fine. If I may, Madam Chair, to Brandy. Brandy is, forgive me, is this outline then, were these some of your ideas as well? Help me understand this a little bit.
Oh, actually, I belong to two focal groups, I guess, per se, focus groups. One is the Michigan Community Development Directors Association, and the other one is the National Association of Housing Redevelopment Officials. So I actually sit on the board of one, and together, amongst all of our agencies, we've decided what business grants is actually a really hot topic right now with the social distancing and the Stay Home, Stay Safe Act. That really created a problem for a lot of local businesses. Another one that's kind of hot, but right now we're kind of waiting to see what happens within our community is rental assistance and mortgage assistance. This was something that Livonia is not going to be participating in because they actually can obtain this funding through the Wayne County Community Action Agency. So one of the things is CDBG cannot fund activities that are available elsewhere. So if there's for an example, with the COVID testing, if the state does come in and start doing COVID testing for everybody, then CDBG will no longer allow us to perform those services. So we'll reallocate that funding probably to business economic development. But I'm trying to think of some of the other things were utility assistance. So we already have a utility assistance program in place. So we didn't feel that there was a need to do a utility assistance. Another program that CDBG has is mental health counseling. So with a lot of people suffering from job loss or illness or anything, the death of family members, they already have access to these programs through the CDBG office. So we really tried to see what we didn't have that we could promote and put out there. So that was the business grants, the PPE, and the testing.
Well, I want to commend you on the business grants. I know we're early in the game, but with my background in small business and owning one here in the city, it's refreshing to hear somebody talk about small business because as we explore this whole craziness more, we're going to have to really focus in on what's going on with our small businesses because it employs. I employ 15 people. And you do the best you can right now. And I don't think some people realize the uniqueness that we all face. And so I commend you for thinking a little bit outside this box, if you will, and helping those of us out here out a little bit. We're surviving it, but I know a lot of people that aren't in this community, and not to be bleak, but, we've got to get our city hall in order. And I know we're all working on other things. And we do have a committee on this. And I'm hoping to talk to Rob and Brandon this week and then hold a meeting on the 20th so we can get other input from other entities besides business. The mental health concerns me a great deal as well. We're seeing a lot of people become very anxious, and our seniors particularly. I get calls. They don't understand what's going on all the time because they don't have access to the internet, you know, and I don't know if you find that in your travels, Brandy, or, you know, the folks that rent places from us, if that be true on a larger scale. And my last question perhaps to you would be, how is it going in these facilities? I'm sure you have your ear to the ground all the time. And what kind of comments, reaction are you getting?
Before I answer that, I do want to actually give some credit to Mark Toromina, because he's actually the one that came to me with the small business grant idea. So we're actually working on it together. We just had to find a way to fund it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Secondly, with regards to our senior properties, I think we're actually doing pretty well. The response at first was a little concerning. Not all the residents really understood what it meant to be proactive in preventing the spread of COVID. And we did obtain masks from the logistics team to hand out to the residents. But we haven't hit an outbreak at either of them. We've only had one
Awesome
case at Mac Towers, Silver Village, and Newburgh Village. We have been very, very strict on who comes onto our properties, who comes into our buildings, and how we perform our maintenance. We've hired additional support to help clean and disinfect all the common areas. So at first, you know, as any change with a home, you know, you don't like to, this residents didn't necessarily like to be advised on how to live their lives, such as staying in your apartment, don't let your relatives in, don't let visitors in the buildings, you can't go in the community rooms. But now that we're weeks into this, they're sort of starting to accept and adapt to these changes. So,
well, awesome job. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so too, and all your considerations for some other areas that we can't all hope to touch each and every moment. You know what I'm saying? So thank you for your creativity there. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Madam President?
Just, Jim, was that you?
Yes, ma'am.
We've got Rob and then Scott with their hands up on the screen. So Rob, then Scott, and then Jim. I'm sorry, council members, Council Vice President Barr, Donovic, and Jolly.
Thank you, Madam President. This question is for Brandy. Thank you, Brandy, for all the hard work that you and your department are doing. We really appreciate it. I just wanted a clarification. I assume I already know the answer, but for any residents listening at home, the potential grants will only be available for Livonia ran businesses, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. And then will there be some sort of restriction on the dollars that businesses that do receive these grants on what they can spend these grant dollars on? Are they going to be restricted? You can only spend them on payroll or utilities, or the business owner will be able to spend it however they see fit?
That's what we're in the process of developing, but more than likely they'll have the freedom to use it towards pay. The idea is to keep people employed. So ideally we would like them to use it towards their payroll, but we do understand that utilities and rent and mortgages are also just important to be able to keep people employed. So those will probably be included in that as well.
Okay, and then my last question, I believe, is probably a little bit premature, but looking at different grant programs that were similar to this, I'm assuming the application process will be online, available for these Livonia businesses, or you're not necessarily at that point yet?
It's going to be done online.
Great, awesome. Okay, well, thank you for everything, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, now we go to Vice President Barr.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Brandy, thank you here tonight. I think you may have said this, so forgive me if I'm making you repeat something, but the PPE, the $29,000 for PPE, that's for PPE for whom?
That is going to be, and actually it's going to be about 19,000. The 29 is for PPE and COVID testing. But we lumped it together just in case we didn't end up doing the COVID testing because the state finally comes in or the county comes in and does it. So the PPE will be for Livonia residents and businesses in Livonia that are having a difficult time obtaining the PPE, and as well for city employees as well that are providing public services. So I guess in a sense, it's going to be available whoever is in need of it.
So we don't see a need for that at this point for the nursing homes and long-term care facilities through the TLC program?
Actually, the CDBG program cannot fund the nursing care programs. Those programs may be available to apply for a grant through the Wayne County Health Department. My understanding is the county got $88 million, and they're maybe funding eligible for the individual privately owned nursing homes to apply. So,
So this, okay, so to be clear, this money that we're talking about, this 196,000, this is the money from the CARES Act that we were discussing earlier, correct?
Yes,
I don't know if you were on the
yes.
call earlier.
yes.
Okay,
So
and that cannot be used for the TLC
cannot.
program?
There actually is 3 objections for the Community Development Block Grant Program. It is only to be used for low to moderate income persons, elimination of slight symptom or urgent need. But the idea is for the community. So, and what the community doesn't have access to. So with regards to PPE, medical facilities that are performing medical services should have access to PPE. Whereas your neighborhood family who just wants to protect themselves when they're going to Kroger might not. So
I understand. That helps clarify for me. I was under this understanding from earlier that that's what we were wanting to use those funds for, was for because of Livonia's long-term care facilities. But that makes sense what you're saying. And then you said that, did I understand the implication correctly that if more funds were to become available through this, that you foresee those going towards the small business grant side of this?
yes, that's the goal, as well as PPE. So
Right,
now that we're going back and amending the original consolidated plan and annual action plan, these 2 activities can continue to be funded with future funds.
Thanks. Thank you for your clarity, and that helps clear up the conversation too as we talk about Livonia's share of the funding through the CARES Act. So appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Vice President Barr. Councilmember Jolly.
Thank you, Madam President. Ms. Isaacson, I just wanted to, number one, tell you that I trust that you know exactly what you're doing with all these funds. You've proved your mastery of this programming and these funding sources many times before. But more importantly, in this particular instance, I want to make sure that we said thank you. There's very few people in our community who have the responsibility that you have with such a vulnerable population. So if you could give your best and our thanks to your staff and all the people who are working in your facilities and to your residents as well, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate that.
All right. Now I'm trying to get back to where I can see if anyone else has a hand up. Before I go to the audience, Ms. Isaacson, Brandy, I do have a few questions, and you've done an exceptional job on this. I've had the opportunity to hear some of the details in the emergency meetings, and you know what it required some dexterity on your part with the Housing Commission, and just there are a lot of pieces to this. And anytime, as we all know, as we all recognize, when you're dealing with federal funds, the I's have to be dotted, the T's have to be crossed, and each one of those has to be done about 20 times. So this is outstanding. Regarding the small business loans, if a business received money through the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, if a Livonia small business received PPP funds, does that make them ineligible for funding through the Cdbg program?
I believe it does.
Okay.
Because they've already received aid. So there were a number of Livonia businesses that were unable to receive aid through the county. So we would like to target those that haven't received anything.
And were the county funds, and this is where I get confused. The county funds, were those, did those come from from CDBG, or did those come, better said, the funds for the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, were those distributed by the county?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what the grant program that the county and the city of Detroit had is they received funding to do the small business loans and do small business financing. And any businesses that were located within the city of Detroit went through the Detroit Economic Development.
Yep.
And those that are, we call the outlying county areas, those would be areas that are not Detroit, go through the county.
Okay.
And then what they do is they further expand on that, where there are agencies such as Livonia that are an entitlement community, which means that we actually get our funding directly from HUD. We do not go through the county. So they selected businesses that were not located in entitlement communities to assist first. So that is how we kind of got to where we're at today, trying to develop this business grant so we can assist those that are in Livonia.
Okay, because the last I had heard was that no Livonia businesses, I originally heard no Livonia businesses got PPP funds through the county. Then I heard that there was a list of some businesses that got them, and then I'm aware of one business I know that did get them. So any of those businesses will not be eligible to apply for the Cdbg money that come directly to Livonia through the CARES Act, right?
That is correct. And my understanding is I did get an email from WAFA from the county, and I do believe approximately 16 businesses were assisted in Livonia.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And I know this is so confusing. I'm not trying to belabor it, just trying to get clarity, right, as to which money comes from where. And, you know,
it is very confusing. I also want to clarify that the process to obtain this funding isn't easy, as where they provide us the allocation and then we get it. There is an application process. And once the application is submitted, HUD actually has a 45-day review of the application before they actually release their funding. So I really don't anticipate receiving this funding until June.
Okay. And then another question about the testing. What kind of, are these the rapid response tests, or how long do these, if they're not, how long, what's the turnaround time in the process for having these tests that we are purchasing processed?
My understanding, and this is going through the fire department, there are going to be the rapid blood tests that test for antibodies as well, and it's immediate. So what will happen is they'll be tested, and anybody that has a positive test will be advised to go and get a follow-up with their physician to have it actually confirmed. But then we'll be able to advise the residents of quarantine and stay safe and all of that.
Do we have to, does HUD help us with a vendor, or are we on our own for a vendor?
We're gonna partner with the fire department.
Okay, so that's the vendor that the fire and police have already established a source with. All right. I don't have any other questions. I see that Council Member Donovic has another question. And then Council Member Toy. Donovic, then Toy.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't mean to belabor this topic. I just wanted to follow up on it. As someone that's navigating the different grant programs and loans through the SBA, so Brandy, Mrs. Isaacson, if you don't mind, if a business applies for the PPP, which is through the SBA, which is funded through a lender, bank, institution, and then the SBA backs it, are you saying that if they are accepted for the PPP, that they will not be eligible to get a grant from the city of Livonia?
Well, I don't want to say for sure. If it is a finance program where they received a loan, it's a little different than receiving the grant. So I would say that if they're just receiving financing to be able to respond to COVID, that's a little different than receiving a grant allotment. And I would think that they would still be eligible for a grant because the financing, they're still paying back.
Okay, I just know that applying for some of these different programs, there wasn't really too many stipulations on if you were approved for one, you wouldn't be approved for another. But that's just my personal experiences. So.
Yeah, so I do know that looking at the county's point system, they, if you had received funding from another agency, what they did is if you qualified, and I'll just give you random numbers. Let's say you qualified for 10,000, but you were only awarded 5,000, you would only get another 5,000. So.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Isaacson. Appreciate it.
All right, Councilmember Toy.
Just one last one. If I may, to Brandy. Brandy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had mentioned that we go through HUD and others go through the county, it sounds like, for some of this trickle down. In your judgment, are we better off going through HUD, or we don't probably have a choice on that, I would guess, or are we better off with the county?
You are correct. We don't have a say in that ball game because we are a community of more than 50,000 people. We
Okay.
receive our allocation directly through HUD. Other agencies that are, or other, small agencies or small towns would go through like a local county or the state of Michigan, which is MISHDA, to receive funding.
Correct. Okay. So basically, I mean, HUD has been pretty expedient and good and all that, right?
Yes, actually, the city of Livonia has a pretty good relationship on both the public housing Section 8 side and the community development side. And our HUD reps are always helping, and we actually have a really good relationship with Redford Township and Westland. So we work together too with our HUD reps, and we also are part of a consortium with the county for other grants. So
Good.
on this, we're always working together.
Awesome. Good. Once again, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Honestly, I could talk grants all day.
Brandy?
Yes.
We will get back, I promise, quickly to take a vote on this, but this does bring up how complicated this is. And when we get past the COVID urgency and, crisis and requiring everybody's time, we will ask you to come in and do an educational session for council. And I think actually now that we've peeled some of this back and seen it, I know at least for me, an educational session will make more sense and be more valuable because I understand more about it and understand some of the distinct programs. So thank you. All right.
Council President, I already have your manual ready.
Okay. I'm sure it's a very thick binder. At this time, I will go to the audience to see if anyone in the audience has any questions. Seeing none, I believe if there are no other questions, we can go ahead and take the vote on this item and I apologize, I have a huge stack of papers and I want to make sure I read that I read the item correctly. So this is a vote on approval to amend the Cdbg block grant program for the 2019 action plan. And this, as it pertains to the application of the additional, right, Brandy, they're additional?
Yes.
Community Development Block Grant Coronavirus Funding.
Correct.
All right. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Donovic,
Aye.
Councilmember Jolly,
Aye.
Councilmember Toy,
Hi.
Vice President Barr,
Aye.
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember McCullough,
Aye.
President McIntyre.
Aye. So we've approved the amendment of the CDBG block grant program to to allocate the special COVID funds that we've received as Ms. Isaacson has presented to us this evening. All right, thank you. That was a long but a very, very important item. And with that, we will go back to the audience. If anyone in the audience would like to address the council on any item that was not covered on this evening's agenda, now is an opportunity to do so. Seeing no one from the audience wishing to speak, I will go ahead and ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Toy, and was that Jolly?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and I think we can safely show 7 on that. So at 8:25, we are adjourned. The city council will reconvene at 8:30 for the study meeting. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at 8:30.